All right, here we are. So this is now your 6th class. We're at the end of week 3 almost here, so good job. You made it this far. Today we're going to go over that seemingly overly complicated workflow that we did on Monday. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through that again and do another project today, focusing on using dictionaries a little bit more. We're going to build a bookstore, and we're going to model it using dictionaries. So we're going to do that today, and then and we'll go through the whole workspace thing, and I'll go through it pretty slowly again, and hopefully after seeing it for the second time, it'll start to kind of become a little more familiar. You don't have to have it memorized yet, by all means. There's still the cheat sheet in the video. And then after that, and after we solve this project today, I will introduce your weekend homework project that can be found right after today's class on the event platform. And for those of you who are still not comfortable setting up your workspace, I will stick around for a little bit to help you guys. I'll walk you through it step by step, and we'll do it together. So you'll have your workspace set up for the weekend project. One thing to note is the project is actually due the following Wednesday, so it's not really a weekend project, but I just encourage doing it over the weekend so that you can focus on the class materials during class and projects on the weekend, like the homework assignments. All right, any questions?
Question in chat.
Okay. This weekend, okay, great question. And I'm going to go over these things again for the people who show up late, but it is group optional. And so what that means is it's we've done mandatory group projects in the past, and people get frustrated with scheduling, and it's hard to have everyone available at a consistent time. And so what we let people do is we can have at the end of class, make sure I don't forget, we can have people maybe say their username on Slack or some way of contacting each other if you're interested in doing it as a group, and you'll just kind of get each other's information here in the class, or at least the people who are interested, and then you can figure out if you want to team up with someone. I encourage group work, and I'll talk about why at the end. There's also the Slack channel for this group. That's actually a really good place to find any fellow students who are interested. The one called B23 Students Private. If you're not in that one, message Santiago and we'll put you in that channel. It's the one that's specific for this group of students. All right, so we're gonna get started. Today we're doing the bookstore, like I said, and today let's just really quick, we're gonna recap over some of the steps we did, and we're gonna dive right into it. One thing I want you to note is that on this particular one, we have a folder here. We have a directory now. And like I said, you can just have directories in your file structure on GitHub. That's fine. You can be organized on the cloud just like you can be organized, on your local setup. So generally speaking, for our course, we're going to have the Python files that we want you to finish or work on or solve. They're going to be in the directory, and our test file is going to be outside there. So you'll get familiar with that structure. It's not really anything you have to memorize, and we're going to go through it again when we can play with it in Cloud9. So the first thing we're going to do, if you guys remember, does anyone remember the first step to getting our workspace set up?
Are you going to fork it?
That's correct. So remember, especially today and future ones, the plan for today's class is we're going to finish the project and make all the tests pass. And when we do that, we're actually going to do an additional step at the end of the project today. We're going to submit those changes back to the cloud here. All right. And to do that, we don't have, well, you don't have access to submit changes to this master directory. And so what we want to do is make our changes on kind of our own space that we can break it or get it working, you know. And so we can save our changes along the way without them being on the master copy here and breaking what's out in production that other people might be using. All right. So to do that, we want to kind of, there's a fly. We want to create our own space. And so the first thing we do is fork it, and that copies all these directories and things over to our setup. So I'm going to hit this button. It's in the top right. And you're not going to get this pop-up probably. You just check off your username. And this is going to copy everything over. Now, we will talk about another way to do that. That's called branches. This is kind of like, we'll learn about what branches are, but they're essentially like different, kind of like forking, but and creating it in your own little workspace here. But you can do it in a way that other people can also kind of contribute. So it's like you want to have a feature you want to work on for your project. Maybe create a branch just to get that one feature working, and other people could kind of contribute and collaborate with you on it. So anyways, for our scope, we're just okay copying it to our own local repository. And by clicking the fork button, now we can see that it's copied over to my directory. Now, the next step, the only other step on GitHub that we really have to do is we have to get this link, click on the green button here, and copy that link. But again, before you do that, make sure you verify that you're on your forked repo and not the master one. Otherwise, when we do this thing that we're going to do and submitting our changes via Git, that's going to be a difficult time if you copied it from the wrong repo. So I just say, take the extra 3 seconds, and when you click on this, make sure it's yours first, so you don't have to do that.
Jason, how do we get to that page right there?
So let me go back one. So we're just going to pass you this link, and you can find it. Well, actually, let me see. Where are we? Oh, no. You just have to get it from me right now. So yeah, usually the first link that you start with, we're going to give you. And for the project this weekend, you'll see right here that you click this. This is just going to be a GitHub link. It looks just like the one I was at, but it's a different project. So that's always your starting point, and the first thing you do is you just log in and fork the repo. All right, good question. So now that we're here, I've made sure we're on my repo. I click the green button, and I click this little copy link here. And that's it for GitHub for now. So after I do all that junk, I can go to my Cloud9. I've already signed in. And if you guys remember, we just click on this giant plus button. Yours will probably be empty because you probably haven't made a workspace yet. And so it'll be pretty obvious that this is the thing you need to do. So you're going to click on this guy, and you'll be here. And if you guys remember, there's 3 steps that we need to do here. We need to give it a name. And you might ask yourself, you know, what should I name this thing? I just find some word in the project name, so I'm going to call this one bookstore. Keep it simple. And then here we're going to paste that link that we got from this green button right here. I just pasted it right here. And the third step is we're going to click on the Python button. So fork it, get the link, go to Cloud9, give it a name, paste the link, and hit Python. Any questions about that? All right. After we do all those things, again, you can verify that it's you're on your repo and not the master one, because you'll see your username right here. That's in the kind of the path here. So if you see your username on GitHub, you know you've done it right. So again, we click Python, and we're going to create our workspace. And now we can dive into this thing once it finally copies over. So now we wait. I had somebody play the Jeopardy song for me before. All right.
Na, 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 na.
All right. Okay, so now we have the workspace almost set up. Those are the first two steps. Remember the GitHub part, and then setting up the Cloud9 workspace. Does anyone remember the last step before we get started?
Create a virtual environment.
That's it. So we're going to remember when you guys are at the end, after we do this project, I'm going to show you guys how to set up your football dictionary if you want to. If you guys are feeling confident, I'm going to set you free before that at one point if you want to just do it on your own. But for some of you guys, I'm happy to walk you through it the first time. So yeah, we're going to create a virtual environment. We're going to say mk virtual env, and then we're going to give it a name. I'm going to call it bookstore. And then I'm going to do -p, and after that I want to set my Python version, because by default it will go to Python 2, and we don't want to mess with that. So -p/user/bin/python 3. Now, no, that's not there. So yeah, if we hit enter now, it's going to build that virtual environment, and we'll know it's working because we can see right here that we're in it to the left of our username there in the parentheses. Any questions so far? Everyone kind of remembering this stuff? At least it's familiar, hopefully. The next thing we need to do is install our dependencies. So in this case, it's in a file called dev-requirements.txt. So sometimes you might have to read what the file name is over here. But it's always going to have the word requirements.txt in it. And so we can see today we've got PyTest and Tox, which helps with testing. So we're going to do pip install -r, and then I'm just going to hit the letter D and hit tab, and it'll auto-complete the rest. After I do that, it's going to install both of these two requirements. And at this point, we have created our virtual environment. Our Cloud9 workspace is there. And to test that I've done it right, that there's always like a third last step after. So there's those two virtual environment commands. You create the virtual environment, and you install your dependencies. And the last thing you want to do is just verify. You do py.test, test.py, and see if this is actually, your test library is actually working. And we can see that it says 3 failed. And in this case, failure is good because it means our tests are actually running. We haven't written any code yet, so the failure is a-okay. And that's it for the setup. As you saw there, I mean, I've done it hundreds of times, so I'm pretty fast with it. But once you're comfortable, and I also was describing it as I did it, but once you're fast, you can do this in 5 minutes and you'll have those commands memorized, and it won't seem so monotonous. That's kind of the point. This is kind of a workflow that is practical in the real world, and you'll do it so many times that it will become second nature to you by the time.
What's the make virtual environment command again?
It's going to be mk. I'll type it in the chat. Okay. mk virtual env name, and then all this again is in the document that I will link again right now. And I'm going to, when I help you guys set up your weekend project, show you those commands again. So yeah, if you click on the last link that I just posted, that's going to have all of the links that you might want. All right.
Hey, Jason.
Huh?
Sorry, I have one quick question. For that make virtual environment command, is that specific to just C9, or is that something you have to do for other software?
You'll use that on your local setup as well. So virtual env is generally going to work, I think, on your virtual setup. But mk virtual env, if you remember, is a wrapper around virtual env that you have to, if you're on a different setup. C9 comes and have some pre-installed stuff. It has Git installed ahead of time. It has make virtual env wrapper installed. So Cloud9 is nice because everybody starts from the same point, and it's got a bunch of nice things already that come with it. If you have a local setup, you're going to have to install virtual env wrapper to get that to work.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and you basically, if you ever have any trouble with that, it depends on your operating system and all that stuff. You're just gonna Google, Python install virtual env wrapper, and I'm sure it's gonna walk you right through it. All right. We do encourage Cloud9 usage for most of this course, but it is kind of cool to explore what you might try out for your own local setup. When I do my Python coding, I actually don't work in Cloud9. I have my own local setup. But it's good to know this. So, all right. At this point, our tests are running, and we can kind of start figuring out what to do at this point. So from here, what I would generally do is, now I'm going to introduce the project, and I would, if I wasn't here introducing it, if I were you guys, I'd read the README first, and then I would open a couple files. I'd open the tests file, and again, like I said, the file that we're going to work on is in the directory here called bookstore. And so we'll just click on this, and as you can see, it's a bunch of empty functions. All right, and then these tests don't work yet because we haven't written in the functions. Okay, so this is going to be an interesting one. So this is less dealing with nested things, and now we're going to start using collections to model things. And we're going to use them to kind of interact with each other. And well, there is some nested stuff in this actually, but this is going to be rather than just organizing data, it's going to be, storing it in a way and having these things kind of have relationships with each other. So the different pieces of information. So we can have a bookstore. That's what we're going to start with. That's going to be the thing that holds everything. And what it's going to hold is authors and books. So those are the three key things we're going to be looking at today. And in this case, we're going to imagine that a bookstore you might create will hold authors and books. And so they're going to kind of have relationships, like authors write books and bookstores have authors and books in them, if you assumed an author lived in the bookstore. Or, if the book is there, then you would say the author is there. Or that's how we're designing it in this case. So we're going to be representing these guys using dictionaries. If you guys remember, it's nice to use dictionaries in this case because we can take advantage of the key value pairs, and when we're storing data and information about books and authors, we'll be able to have keys to describe those pieces of information. So when we look at a value, if it was a number, that number would actually have meaning to us because we'll have a key describing what it is. And so this interface we're going to have between all these different items here, we're going to follow an interface. And an interface, if you want to think about it, is just an input and an output. We have an input to something, like if we call a function and it has a parameter, we send that as an input, and whatever it returns is the output. And so as long as we respect that, we can build this thing to however it's designed here in the tests. The tests are going to tell us that input-output interface that we're going to have to make work. As it says right here, we have to read the tests. In general, especially when you guys are working on your project this weekend here, if you get stuck, the quickest answer is always going to be read the tests and see if you can figure out what we expect the interface to be and how we expect it to work. And generally, if you go through and you try and read it one line at a time, and we're going to do that today, you'll hopefully figure out what's going on. And if that doesn't help, use the mentors. So let's keep going. The first thing we're going to be working on is we're going to create a bookstore. We're going to have three different kind of things. Like I said, we're going to have bookstore, authors, and books. So we're going to think about, pretend you were put on your designer hat. Maybe you don't have that hat yet, but imagine you're designing code. Somebody tells you, I want to create a bookstore with authors and books. And they don't tell you anything else. We do tell you other stuff, but just pretend for a second that's all I told you. you'd have to decide, knowing what you know now about the 4 main collections. You could say, well, would I make my bookstore a list? Would I make it a set? Would I make it a tuple? Or would I make it a dictionary? Because generally, a bookstore is going to hold multiple pieces of information. And so from that, you'd know it needs to be a collection. And so at that point, you just need to choose which collection makes the most sense. And this is where you kind of imagine, if you remember when I talked about the characteristics of each collection, you'd say, well, does order matter? Would it be nice to have key value pairs? What about duplicates? And so you start thinking about those questions. And for this case, we've decided that for our bookstore, it'd be nice to store it as a dictionary, so that, like I said, we can take advantage of key value pairs, and all the values will have a key that's kind of human readable associated with it, and we'll be able to have a little more meaning behind it when we're reading it. And so our bookstore, we're going to start with that, is going to hold the bookstore's name. We're going to give it a name. We'll pass a parameter here. And it's also going to hold all of the authors, all of the books that are in it in the bookstore, and all of the authors that wrote those books. And so, like I said, we've chosen to use a dictionary to do this because it's going to be a little more meaningful. I'm going to talk about this part in a little bit. So if we look at this code, there are 7 empty functions here. All right, there's create bookstore, give bookstore name, add author. So there's a couple regarding the bookstore creation. There's a couple regarding working with authors, and there's a couple for books. And so you can kind of break it down in your head and do one thing at a time. And of course, we've conveniently ordered it in the way that, you know, is the most efficient way to do this thing. We're going to do the bookstore first, because the bookstore is we have to have a bookstore to hold all the books and authors once we create those. So we're going to do these functions first. Once we have our bookstore set up, we can, we'll have a function called add author, and we'll be able to pass in 2 strings, the name and nationality of our author, and put them in our bookstore. I'm going to talk about how that works in just a minute. Now, from this line of code, what can you guys deduce? What do we know about this function? And even, this is kind of a read my mind question. I'm not sure if you guys are going to get this. Any ideas? If you look at this whole line, all right, my question was too vague. What's up?
Is it that Poe is going to be a dictionary?
Yeah, that's one thing. So yeah, so perfect. If we look,
Does that have to do with the return value there?
Yeah. So sometimes you have a function call and there's no equal sign. We don't store the result anywhere. But the first thing we can note is that this function receives 3 parameters, and it's being stored somewhere. So we're returning something, and we're returning it in a variable called Poe. And if we look at the next 2 lines, I already heard this from one of you guys, but we can see that Poe is being accessed like this. What does this look like? What do you think Poe is?
The dictionary names a key.
It's a dictionary because we're trying to use the square brackets and putting a string in there to access it with a key. So just by reading this, even without looking at any of this text around it, we've seen that we're going to have to write an add author function. It receives 3 parameters. It returns something, and that something that it returns is a dictionary with 2 keys, name and nationality. That's a lot of information we've figured out from these 3 lines of code without having to read any of this text. And so I want you guys to kind of think in that way when you're stepping through these tests in here, because you might not always know everything you want to, but you can usually figure it out. All right? So from the context above, maybe you guys read this, you can see that authors are represented as dictionaries. And so then we receive all those things, and one thing to note is the keys here for name and nationality. It actually matters what keys we use for the key names, because when we start testing these, the test is going to be using a specific key in our dictionary to see if we've got a key value pair created in our dictionary. All right, so you kind of have to always follow whatever the test is doing. Sometimes if there are no tests, or if you are writing the tests, you have a little bit more creative freedom there. But in this case, if the tests are already done before we start coding, and that's test-driven development, and that's kind of ideal, then you know exactly what you need to do and what you need to kind of name some of your variables or keys. So what this is going to do is we're going to basically send two strings for our author and create an author dictionary and get these kind of key value pairs set up, and ultimately add that author to our bookstore. So that's what that's doing. We'll kind of dive into this more. I'm kind of trying to give a quick high level, and then once we get to this point in the code as we're writing these functions, we'll come back to this. Once we've filled up our bookstore with authors, we're going to have a function that lets us search for authors. And so in that case, we're going to be able to search for our author's name, and if we've already added that author to our bookstore, we will be able to search for it based on like a string of a part of its name that's not case sensitive. The same kind of logic applies to books. We're going to create them in the same kind of way with an add book function, and we're going to pass this information. The only difference is this one, the book, we have to create an author before we can create a book, because the book has to be written by someone. So this is where we're kind of getting into relationships between the things we're creating. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more 2 weeks from now. So in this case, we have to create an author first, so that the author has to exist in order to write the book, if you want to imagine it like that. And we're going to actually pass that author, that variable, that dictionary, for our author to the book as a parameter when we create the book, so the book actually knows who wrote it, and can, because Poe here, our author, is represented as a dictionary, we'll have all of that author's information that we receive when we pass it this variable, because it receives a dictionary of that author's information. Does that kind of make sense? It'll make more sense when we get here. High level, hopefully it makes a little sense though. Once we've done all that, we can search our books by title and by author. And finally, if we're searching books by author, sometimes authors have written more than one book, and so we need to make sure that if the author has written more than one book, we return not just the first book that matches when we're searching, but all of the books that match that author. So we kind of want to build a collection. That was probably a lot for a lot of you, and so we're going to step through it. But were there any high-level questions about what we're about to do? All right. There's one thing I want to remind you guys of really quick before we dive into this. I'm going to create a quick REPL for this. You guys remember the calendar thing we did a week ago? Hopefully, a little bit. If we had a calendar and it's an empty dictionary, then if we have a and we receive a calendar. Oh no, my spacing's only 2. All right, try again. And so if we call our function here, a function, and we pass it a calendar, and in this thing, actually we're going to pass it our calendar that we just created right up here. Okay, and so in this thing, if we just take our calendar, well now we've So we send it this calendar up here as our parameter here, and we receive it as a calendar here. We temporarily change the name. And so we say a calendar, and we're going to create a new thing, new key equals values. I don't know. And so if we do this, and we call our function, and we say, so if we print out new calendar, so we're sending this empty dictionary over to this function. We call it right here, the function. We send it here. And so we receive our empty dictionary there. We create a new key value pair here. This is our key. This is our value. And then we return the calendar after we set that up, right? So, and our returned calendar goes right here. So this is just a refresher. We talked about this a little bit a week ago, but it's important in today's class. So if I run this and we print it, we're going to see that, hey, we've changed our calendar here that we sent. And we've created that and we're returning the calendar and everybody's happy, right? Any questions about that so far? All we did was send a dictionary to a function, then change the dictionary, and then return the dictionary. Now, I'm going to do something kind of interesting here. What if I change this to print just calendar? What do you guys think is going to happen? Is this calendar
Be empty. Oh no. Yeah.
So this is tricky. I've changed it to just calendar here. This calendar, we sent it to this function, and it might have changed the name of it. It's this a calendar now is referencing or pointing to this original calendar, okay? This one is kind of outside the function, and so we've changed it. But that change is pointing to this one over here, and so we changed it in here, and that change can be seen all the way out here. And so an interesting thing is we don't actually even need to return anything. That change is reflected. We're changing our pointer. We're changing the contents of our dictionary, but the original dictionary kind of stays the same. We are only keeping track of, the bucket or the collection of key value pairs, and we're not keeping track of what changes inside of there in this function. So what I mean by that is we send our calendar that's empty to this function, and if we change it inside the function, those changes are going to be reflected outside of it, and they're kind of permanent changes outside of the function. Do you guys remember that from the calendar thing?
Yep.
So that's important today. It's an important property of dictionaries. Technically, we could have created, a new calendar in here and done something, but we wanted to just change the original one, and that's because this guy is kind of global to this, and it's just keeping the thing. Are you guys kind of following at least what's happening there?
Do you always generally want to return though, or with something like this, people wouldn't return?
In this case, I wouldn't, because it's just we're doing kind of a mutable operation. We're changing our calendar there. We don't need to return it. It's kind of redundant. If I was turning this into an immutable one where I returned a different calendar or something, maybe, and this is the difference. Sometimes you want to change this, and sometimes I wouldn't want to change this. And this is kind of where you have to be careful in code. Because if you have some variable in your program and you send it to a function, and now you know that it can be changed in the function, that change is going to be kind of permanent. If you're working on a team with something and they have another function here, if we had def another function, we could, somebody else might call their function before you call yours, and then they've changed your dictionary before you get to it, and it might not be expected. So it's one of those things where you just have to be careful. And know this is kind of, if you intend on doing this, it's okay. But you just have to make sure, you know, your coworkers understand that this is a thing, which they generally will, and that you're careful yourself if you're running one of your own functions before that. Yeah. But generally I wouldn't use the return keyword on this because I know it's mutable, and I know that I'm doing this. I would use the return keyword if I was making an immutable operation and creating a new calendar that was not changing this original one. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So the reason I just went off on that tangent is because we're going to take advantage of that mutable characteristic of dictionaries. Note that other mutable collections can kind of have the same thing go on as well. And so we're going to build our bookstore with this function. But if you notice, every single following function after that receives bookstore as the first parameter, okay? We're going to create, remember, our bookstore is going to be represented as a dictionary, and it's going to hold all of our authors in our books. Well, every time we add an author, not only do we have to return some information here about that author, but we also have to store that author back in our bookstore. Because every time, if we didn't store every author and every book we add in our bookstore, then we would never be able to search through our bookstore to find them later. When we add an author right now, if we just create it and then return it, and we don't add it to our bookstore dictionary, we would essentially kind of forget about it after the function, you know? And so if we create a nice dictionary to hold all these things, it will enable us to take advantage of that and kind of either use the dictionary and mutate it to add books and authors and change it, or use it just to reference it and search through it to find authors with matching names or titles or authors. Does that make sense? If it doesn't, it will hopefully make a little more sense as we dive into this thing. This one's a little bit kind of abstract today in terms of learning it, but it does come together when we start writing code, which is right now. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with the first test. Again, I've made sure we can run tests. And like I said, it only makes sense to run tests this way once you've got some code written. We don't have any code written. And let's pretend we don't know what to do from reading this README. Let's read the tests to figure out how we're going to do that. So there's only 3 lines for this first test. It's pretty straightforward. We're going to call our create bookstore function. We're going to pass it the name of our bookstore that we want to create. And then we're going to store that in a variable called store. Okay? So from that, we know this is returning something. We don't know what it's returning yet, but if we read the README, we know it's a dictionary. And then after that, the next line, we call the next function here, give bookstore name. And that's just going to try and we're going to pass it our store. Notice this is the same variable. Whatever this thing returns, we're going to pass it as a parameter to the next function, and we're going to use that to try and pull the name out of it that we just stored. So our bookstore that we create is going to be a dictionary. We're going to create a key value pair. The key is going to be called name probably, and we're going to store this as the value. And the next function we're just going to use to kind of pull the name out of the dictionary and make sure we did a good job. So once it gets the name from our dictionary, we're going to store that in a variable called name. And then lastly, we just check to see if the name, we create a dictionary, we create the key value pair for name to be Remoter's bookstore. Then we call another function to pull that name back out and see if we stored it correctly. And then finally, we test it with an assert statement to make sure that name is the thing we just created it with. Make sense? I know there's 2 functions involved here, but there's only one assert statement. Any questions? I know this one's tricky, so please speak up if you have any questions. I'm sure a lot of you share the same questions. So All right. We're going to start out with create bookstore. Any idea where we should start?
Blank dictionary.
Yeah, so we're going to create a dictionary. How should I do that? You guys are going to help me today.
Bookstore equals squigglies.
Yep. Squigglies, I like that. So, and we know we need to store the name. How would I do that? So we receive the name here as its first parameter, and we need to store that as the value. And the key, we'll just call the key name. All right, so if we go back here, we need to create a key called name, and we need to store the parameter we receive.
So would it be bookstore, square brackets, and then assign, use the key name and assign that as the value? Remoter's bookstore.
So you might think Remoter's bookstore, but that would be hard coding it. So we actually just want to remember this is a parameter. This name and this name are different. This is a string called name, and this is a variable called name. This is hard coded. This is variable. This is going to change. So ultimately, if we store name here, it's going to enable us to, whenever we create a bookstore, we can give it a different name every time. Make sense? A lot of people kind of get confused when you see name and name here. That's confusing, but I want you guys to think name in reference to this dictionary. This is just a key. This is all one big variable if you want to think about it. And this is just the value here. So a lot of times in a lot of programming languages, you'll see the same thing repeated on both sides. This is the data, generally, that comes from a parameter on the right side, and the left side is just going to be a variable name. All right. So we also need to store authors and books as key value pairs in this. So we could do bookstore, authors. Note that I put an S there and not just author. Remember, when we have a collection, we want to use plural for the name, so that if we ever do a for loop, we can say for author and authors. It's a little bit more meaningful and intuitive. How do you think I should store my authors? What kind of collection?
A list.
Why?
Because there can be multiple authors.
Right, so we can use any collection here. A set wouldn't really make sense, and a tuple wouldn't really make sense, because a tuple you could not change. So you're really deciding between a list and a dictionary here. And so then you ask yourself, well, does order matter? No, not really in this case, but it doesn't hurt either. And so the question is, how do I decide list or dictionary? Well, a dictionary, you'd have to come up with a key value pair for every author. And then you have to get creative when you're thinking of a key to how to access it. You know, you might say, well, maybe the author's name should be the key, or maybe, you know, something. And if you ever have to ask yourself that question, how do I want to store something as a key? You have to kind of create your own key there. It's probably just a list. So in this case of a list, we don't need to come up with some creative key name for each value. A list will just give us a nice index, and we can use that. Does that make sense? If you think about it, when you're creating key value pairs for dictionaries, if you had to come up with the key yourself, you're trying to think of a intuitive way you'll be able to access it later. And if you were saying like the author's first name, that might be difficult to access. So a list is, we can just, you know, move on to the next one with the for loop really easily. We're going to store the books the same way. And then finally, like the test says, we need to return something, and we're just going to return that bookstore. You guys following this part? Any questions? I'll even read the chat if you're afraid to use your microphone or don't like microphones. All right. If there's no questions, I'll keep going. This way works, but there's another way we could have done it. Remember, this is kind of doing it programmatically. We have all this information for this bookstore right here. You know, if we can create all these ahead of time, we don't have to like parse some information or something. We know that the key is going to be called name. And so we can kind of build this literally, actually, because we have all the information right there when we are calling this function. So we can say authors is an empty list, and then books is also an empty list. I personally prefer this way over this way because if I have all the information at the beginning, I prefer this way, but either way works. So finally, the last optimization I would say that you could do, I just think this looks cleaner. It's a little less code because you don't have to type bookstore every time and do square brackets. The last thing we can do is we're creating this variable called bookstore here, and we don't actually need to create that variable. We could just, this is like a middleman that doesn't need to exist. We can actually just, because all we're doing is we're saying bookstore is this thing and return bookstore. So we could really just put this thing right here and never create a variable and just return that dictionary we're creating there on the fly. And so this is the cleanest way of doing that. The way we did it at first was great. It's fine. It's my job in this class to show you the best way so that you guys can kind of, it's the way we want you to do the learn assignments and everything. It's just get it working at first and then try and see how we might do it differently or how to make your code a little more efficient. But the first step is get it working. Any questions with this? You guys are like crickets today.
I actually have a quick question. Is there a way with dictionaries to access the key value pairs using dot notation, or do you always have to use the index with square brackets?
So let's see. Generally, square brackets are going to be used in some platforms we're going to learn later. You can use the dot notation, but if you imagine, hold on, let's go here. So if we were to do print calendar, let me get rid of this, dot new key, that's not going to fly. And you can imagine you can't really just, I don't think, yeah, you can't use the dot notation in this way. But later, the last week or the 8th week of this course is the 3rd week. We're going to show a way that you can use that a little bit later on, but it's a different, it's when you're writing HTML code, so it's a little different. So unfortunately, no, not until we get to objects. Good question. I think the dot notation looks a lot cleaner. All right. So we've made our bookstore. We can almost try and run this test, but we have to finish the next function here to do that. So in this one, we know that we're going to pass that bookstore we just created. So this dictionary right here, we're going to pass it to the next function. And the next function has that dictionary. And all we want to do is pull out the name from it. All right, so how would I do that? We have the bookstore. We receive it as a variable called bookstore. How do I get the name out of it? I want this name from this key.
Just use the call the key, return bookstore square brackets key.
Yep, so we'll just say return bookstore, square brackets, and the key is name. And that's it. We have the bookstores. Like, because we send it as a parameter here, that dictionary, we can use it just like we would any other day. And so we just access the value by putting in the key name. So now if we go to our tests and we do the first test, I'll do -k down here. And I'll say create. And we have passed the first test, which is the easiest test. It's only 3 lines. Does that make sense to you guys so far? How we started this out? Does that not make sense? Is probably the better question. All right. Now things are going to get interesting. Now we have to add authors. So now we're going to start talking about relationships between these guys again. Remember, every book is going to be created by an author. And every time we add an author or add a book, we're going to add it to our bookstore dictionary here. And so you might imagine we're just going to put them in these lists every time we create one. We could technically have like an add author thing, but basically it needs to fill up our bookstore, and we do in this method or function. Any idea on how it would start? Does anyone remember what authors are being represented as?
List.
This, oh yeah, this is, but each author, when we create them, what each author is represented as. From this part?
A dictionary?
There.
Yep, so we call this, it returns something, and that something looks like a dictionary. Note that the keys are name and nationality, and we are sending it name and nationality. So we're going to create an author, and it's going to be a dictionary. How do I do the key value pairs there? What should they be?
Is it just name and nationality?
Yeah, but like, how would I type it?
So use name as the key in quotes,
That.
and then call name as the, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I know it's, sometimes my questions are simplistic, but I want you guys to be comfortable seeing the word name on both sides for the key and the value, because the parameter, I like to think about it this way. If I'm creating these like this, I don't have to be creative when I'm creating a key name. I'm just going to copy the parameter name here, make that a key name, and store whatever the value in the parameter that we receive as the value there. So that's our author object, or dictionary, not object. And so now we're storing that information. That's great. Now once we've created that author, we need to store it in our dictionary here somehow. What's the code for that? What would I type? Anybody?
Bookstore key author dot append equal to author dot append brackets author. Sorry.
So it's going to be authors is the key, not just author.
Yeah, authors.
And so that'll get us to this list. So
We'll append the dictionary in the list.
Yep. Dot append, and we'll send it this author dictionary. We created a variable here, just like that. So first of all, we receive bookstore, this dictionary, as a parameter. So again, we have access to all that information. And so we just plug in the key authors to get to this list. And so at this point, we have an empty list, and we're doing dot append on that list, and we send it our author dictionary. So it has, now it's going to be a list with one dictionary in it that's got the key name, and then whatever name they send, and nationality, whatever nationality they send. Does that make sense? The last thing we need to do is, just like this said over here, from the context, we need this thing to return something. And from this context, it looks like that thing we're returning is just a dictionary with the author dictionary. So all I'm going to say is return author here at the end. So I'm going to save that. And let me walk you through the tests now. If you didn't, so I kind of know exactly what to do for this because I've done it a million times, but if you didn't, we'd start here on line 13 and we read all these tests. So we start out for this one, it's called test get add authors. So now or test get add and get authors. So we're going to start out by creating our store. Just like we did up here, we're going to start fresh because it's inside a different function. So we create a bookstore and it's going to look just like the one we created. And then we're going to add an author. We're going to add an author to our store and we're going to give it the name and nationality for Poe, Borges, and then Joyce. All right. So we have 3 different authors, and we can tell that there were each of this function add author is returning something, like I said earlier. And right below here, we can see these assert statements, and we can see that it's checking that what we return from the add author function is a dictionary with a key called name, and that key is going to have as a value Edgar Allan Poe, which we received as a parameter here. And so we just basically check to make sure that we built those author dictionaries correctly, and when we return them. Does that make sense? We do something, we write a function, and then we make sure that whatever we return is kind of the way we expect. The last part of this we haven't done yet. It's going to be get author by name, and we want to, now that we've added all 3 of these authors, we are returning them like this, but we're also, like this line says here, appending them to this list of authors here in our bookstore dictionary. So we need to make sure, now we're going to take advantage of the get author by name function we're about to write, and we're going to pass it an author's name, and we're going to make sure that that author is in the bookstore. Okay, so we're going to kind of search through the list of authors here somehow, and we're going to compare the author's name. Remember, the name is stored in the key name inside of our author dictionary, and see if it matches this one that we're searching. And if there is a match, we're going to return something and return it and put it in a variable called author. Then finally, we're just going to make sure whatever author we do find is a match. We're going to make sure the match is correct and make sure that when we're searching for James Joyce, well, we've created this Joyce dictionary here already. And we're going to make sure whatever we return when we're searching is the same as that Joyce dictionary. Any questions?
Yeah, I have one. Just out of curiosity, for the project, will the functions will you already have them laid out the same way that this is, at least for the initial?
Yeah, we're always going to have, for the most part, our functions laid out like this. In this one, for the homework one this weekend, they're separated by files. And we'll talk about that one later. But yeah, generally we have the structure. And sometimes, like when we get into object-oriented programming, which is in 2 weeks, and it's not as scary as it sounds, you'll be comfortable enough to figure out what you'll need to do pretty quickly. Okay, so we need to write this function. Like I said, we're going to receive a string of the name as a parameter in our bookstore so that we can access this list of authors here. We want to check through that list and see if the name is a match, and if it is, we want to return that author dictionary, not just the string. Think about it. If we're passing it a string here, and we found a match, we wouldn't just return the same string we were searching with. We want to get all the information. So we've sent back the entire dictionary of information, and as we can see, we'll see that in the tests here, that it returns an author, and that author is a dictionary. All right, so hold on, let me get rid of some white space so we can kind of see. So we have this is our bookstore. I'll copy this down here for a second. So pretend this is your bookstore. All right, this is for reference. How would I start this? Any ideas? How would I approach this guy?
You'd have to do some type of for loop inside of the list of names.
Perfect. So what's the code for that?
you're going to use, let's see, it'd be like for name and names, or just name actually, right?
Where are we getting that name from?
It's being passed in as a
Oh, this is the one we're searching for. Remember, this is just
searching for. So that's from the original dictionary, right?
this. So this name we're receiving is just the search term. We need to search through our list of authors.
Yeah, your list of names in the dictionary.
Yeah. So we need to find this list and find the name. You following?
Yep.
All right. So what's the code?
So it would be bookstore, right?
Mm-hmm.
Brackets. And then is it name, or is that authors? Would it be?
So that would be the name of our bookstore.
Yeah.
So it's authors.
It's authors, yeah.
And so really quickly, I would change this to for author in books of authors, because we're going to get the plural authors for our list of authors, and we're going to get one at a time from that list of dictionaries. Make sense?
Yep.
What's next?
Could we use just test if it's in?
What author or something? What do you mean?
No. So whatever that string is, if it's in the list.
Oh, we
Statement,
could.
right?
What's up?
Don't you need an if statement?
Yes, we will need an if statement. We're just deciding what the if statement is. What do you think it is, Marcos?
No, I have no idea,
Okay.
honestly.
So we could check if it's in, but remember, if we use the in keyword, that would just tell us if it's present. We're already kind of looping over the thing. So if we say, if we were going to use in, we could say if the thing is in before we start looping. But we're already looping through the thing, and we're not going to save any time by checking if it's in. We need to find if what the author is and return it. So we need to find when it's a match and return the entire author dictionary. Does that make sense? If we just use in keyword, it might find that it's in there, but we're not on the correct author in the for loop.
So you just if it matches and then return the index.
If it matches, we'll just return the entire author that we're already.
Okay.
So how do we see if it matches? What's the word? What's the code for that?
If author is equal to name.
If what?
If author is equal to name.
And then if it is, what do we do?
We're trying to return the dictionary for that author.
So we'll just return author.
Sorry.
Remember, we're looping over a list full of author dictionaries, right? And so if we find a match,
Okay.
find that current author dictionary. Does that make sense? There's only one problem with this code. Author is a dictionary, and name is a string, and that's never going to be equal right now. Now, remember, authors are being represented in this case by dictionaries and not strings, so we have to get the author's name and compare it to the name.
If author square bracket name equals name.
Because we created our authors like this, and so that's how you would do that. Make sense to everybody? I know this is pretty weird. We're going to basically look at, we receive our search term. I'm going to go through it again. We receive our search term. We want to make sure and see if any of our authors in our list of authors, remember our authors represent this dictionary, see if any of those authors have the same value for name in their name key here. So the first thing we do is we say, well, we need to loop through this list of our authors and see, and then check each of those authors' name key to see if the value is the same as our search term. And if it is, as soon as we find a match, we can return that author dictionary. Any questions with that one? It's kind of funky. Happy to answer questions.
I'm just curious, how would you modify that? Like if someone just used the last name of the author, because if you use name like this now, it has to be the first, middle, last, right?
So right now in this case, we are using their last name or their full name actually for the name.
Okay.
So yeah, that's like a design thing. Yeah, you could use last name, but in our case, we're just going to use full name, and ideally there shouldn't be any duplicates with the full name. And if there were, we have to kind of address that. Which would, yeah, I have to think about that. Well, if they had the same name, actually, we're going to see what happens with duplicates actually right here, okay? So, so your question will be answered. All right, so now we have to do some book stuff, and the good thing is these book functions are very similar to author, like eerily similar. All right, so what I'm going to do really quick, we're going to see these disappear because we finished this function. And we can test that one really quick. I'm just going to say author. I got the word author from test add get authors. So I'm just going to take the word author there, and that's unique enough to find that test. And we pass it. So now we've only got one test left. There's only 3 for this project. See, 1 failed, 2 passed. And it's for books. So the first thing we need to do is add a book. Books are going to be very similar to authors, except they receive a title instead of a name, an ISBN, which is just some number that we made up. And then finally it receives one more parameter, which is going to be our author dictionary. Like I said, this will give our book access to the author's information, so we can kind of see that. So, and you might think, well, that sounds complicated. It's not necessarily as complicated as you think, because if you look at the tests, we just receive all of those things as parameters, and so we don't have to really do anything fancy there, okay? We're just storing parameters, and so as you can see, just like we did over here, we kind of created the author before we created the book. If we look at the tests, first we create the bookstore to hold all the information, then we add our authors, and those get stored in our bookstore, and then we add our books so that we can kind of learn about our authors. I guess we changed it to strings. So when we add our books, we just receive those 4 parameters, and then after we do that, we can check. I guess we're kind of skipping around here. We're using the search books by title function that's just going to be like the same thing as searching by the author name. And we can see that we're storing our books as a dictionary, and it's going to have the 3 keys, ISBN, title, and author. And so from that information, we can see these are the 3 keys we need in our book dictionary, and we're going to store it just like before. So how would I start this out? I want this code to look exactly like I did for the author, pretty much, except we're going to store these 3 things instead of the other. Anyone want to take a shot? I'm not going to show the code for a second. See if you remember anything. Anybody who hasn't talked in a while want to take a shot?
I wish I had an answer for you, but I don't.
Keep practicing, Marcos.
I will.
Anybody? All right, anybody want to take it now? The floor is open, even if you've talked before.
Yeah, I feel like I'm talking a lot.
There's always 1 or 2.
Yeah,
It's just the
having
way.
a good week, I guess. We're gonna return curly braces.
Probably return. Okay.
And just go straight into assigning the keys and values.
How do I do it? Tell me how to do one and I'll do the rest.
All right, so key, was it called store in the other example? Or would you just do it as bookstore?
No, we don't need to worry about that right now. We're creating the book.
Yeah, because that's being added to bookstore. Got it. So just title in quotes.
Yep. Quotes. And then what?
Colon, title.
I know you know it. Okay. So that's the general thing. Don't forget to put quotes around your keys. Sometimes if you're in a hurry, you might write like title. That's not going to work. So ISBN, and I just did the same thing I was talking about. Author and author. Now, the problem with this code right now, this is good, but the problem is you want to return right away, and we have to add our book all the way up here to our bookstore first. And if we return in the first line here, we can't do anything else. All right? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I got it. So you're going to create a parameter as
a variable.
Book.
Yep. And so now how do I add that book to our bookstore with the key books?
Bookstore book.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, bookstore square bracket books. That append book.
You got it. And then now, after we've done that, we can return. And again, the reason we couldn't return before is because we wanted to do an additional thing, and return immediately exits the function. So we had a little bit more work to do. And that's it. It's going to add our book to now the list of books here, and we'll fill that up every time we add a book, and we'll also return the book so we can test it. All right, anyone want to take a shot at get book by title? It's the exact same way we did get book by author, or get author by name, whatever it was called. How do I look through all my books?
We're going to use a for loop again.
Yep. What do I do?
For book and
Yep.
bookstore square bracket books.
Perfect. Then what?
If book square bracket title equals title.
Perfect.
Return book.
You got it. Nice. That's impressive. Okay, so this is pretty much the exact same way we did the author, and that's why I was kind of quizzing you guys. So yay, you're learning. Congratulations. So one last part, so now some of these red X's will go away. We've added the add book. The last thing we need to do is get books by author. This one's a little bit tricky because, like I was saying at the beginning, an author might have written multiple books. And so we kind of have to handle that case. The way we did it for these ones, remember, if we're getting book by title and the title was a match, we just return the book immediately, because there should only be one book with a title, right? There shouldn't be duplicate titles. I mean, there probably are nowadays, but for our bookstore, there's no duplicate titles. And so in this case, it's okay to return as soon as we find a match. But in this case, with author, because there can be multiple books by the same author, it's not okay to return at the first match. We need to make sure there's not other books by the same author first. All right? So any idea how I might store my books now?
A list?
Yep. We need to say, I'm just going to say books is equal to an empty list. So now instead of returning a book if I find a match, I'm going to append it to this list, and otherwise most of it pretty much is the same. All right. So I'm going to just type this one. So I'm going to say for book and bookstore. Oh, I'll just type it out. Books. We're going to loop through each of our books. And I'm going to say if book author is equal to author, not like that, our parameter author. Instead of returning, we're just going to append to our list of books right here, books.append book. And then the only tricky part here is where, now what do I do? And where do I do it?
Got to return the list at
Where do I return? What indentation level?
at the for loop.
Yeah.
Match that indentation.
Yep, you got it. Because you need to make sure the for loop is finished checking all of the other books before you return. If I did it here, this is going to return after the first book. You know, we need to make sure it checks all of the books in our bookstore for a matching author first. And so by putting it on this indentation level, we do that. And if I run all my tests now, it works. And we have this beautiful, kind of beautiful 50-line bookstore. And I mean, this thing, it works. If you want to think about it, like we can create bookstores now with different names. We can add books and authors, and when it does, it automatically puts them in our bookstore that we pass here as a parameter for all of these. And we can search for them. I mean, like, we have modeled a functioning system with dictionaries and functions here, taking advantage of the mutability of our bookstore dictionaries and the fact that we can change them and pass them to each of these functions so we have all that information at all the points. Does that make sense? Any questions with the way we organize this and designed this? So if there's no questions, I'm assuming if I threw this project at you guys now and had you start from scratch without my help, you could do it all? Huh? I don't know. I'm kidding. All right. So we are at the point which we didn't get to Monday because we had that one additional test that I left for you guys to do if you wanted to. Today there was not an additional test. We have, well, you guys can always practice these things. So anyways, and try it. Yeah, I recommend if you guys have time, I don't know what your timing is, but like if you struggled with this, try and go back through it on your own, or you know, keep practicing with these concepts, use the mentors, you know, all that stuff. All right. So at this point, this will hopefully happen for you at some point this weekend when you're working on your project here. At some point, you're going to finish it, and you're going to get all your tests passing, and you're going to celebrate however you like to celebrate. Maybe you're going to like give yourself a hug or a pat on the back or go drink a beer, whatever. But you're going to finish your code, but it's working here on Cloud 9, but it's not, you know, reflected on the cloud for GitHub. And so, I mean, this is great that we got this working, but if we don't have it uploaded to the cloud here, it doesn't really help us a whole bunch. And so now I'm going to teach you guys the last couple of steps here to upload our stuff to the cloud. And this part isn't too bad, but if you did not copy it from your forked repo, if you forgot to fork it, or if you cloned the link here from the master copy instead of yours, this isn't going to work for you. And so that's why I've really stressed that point. So the first thing we can do is we can type git status. Git is kind of the medium for uploading your changes in code. I hear fireworks outside. Weird. And you can upload it using Git. Git works with other repository things. GitHub is not the only one. There's like Bitbucket and other things. Git works with other ones too. but we're going to talk about it with GitHub. So if we do git status, git is the command to kind of access that software. And so if we do git status, you can read all this stuff or not. You can see that we changed one file here. We wrote all our code was in this one file called bookstore.py. And it can tell you that it knows, it's, you know, behind the scenes, it's tracking all of the files you've changed. And so we can immediately see that we've only been working on one file and that it's there. And of course, before we do any of this process, we've made sure all our tests pass. We don't really want to upload code that's not finished for our projects. In the real world, you can do commits as many as you want, and it is nice to actually commit often, just so your code doesn't break. Okay, so once we're here, we see we've changed something, and yes, this is the file that we've been working on. We want to upload this one to the cloud. So the next thing we want to do is git add, and we're going to type bookstore, basically this path right here. I'm going to do bookstore/bookstore.py. Some people are going to do git add and then a dot. I'm going to maybe show that later. I don't know. You can use git add dot instead, and that's going to commit, or it's going to add everything here. It's a little dangerous though. Sometimes you're going to end up adding files that you don't want to add, or sometimes you're going to have like hidden files here if you don't have your settings correct. I can never, oh, it's in this cog here. If you don't have your hidden files kind of hidden here, they're going to show up right here, and it's going to be really annoying, and you're going to like upload those with your changes to GitHub, and you don't want to upload anything about your workspace. You don't want to upload your virtual environment. Remember, if you use virtualenv instead of mk virtualenv, it'll create a folder up here. Sometimes there's like hidden files. You don't want to upload in that. So to start, I don't encourage you to use git add dot until you're familiar, or at least you've reviewed everything that says modified here. All right. But to start, I'm going to explicitly add just that file. Going to press enter. And now I like to do git status in between each step to make sure it went well. So if I do git status again, that file has turned green. That means it's staged. Staged means it's going to be, it's a file that you want to upload the changes for. If you can imagine, when you're working on a bigger project later on in life, you're going to be working on multiple files at the same time. You might have one ready to upload and another's just not there yet, if you're doing multiple things at once because you're crazy. In that case, you can verify, you know, this one might be green because you want to upload it. Another one might still be red because you don't want to upload it. It's kind of like pick which ones you want. So this one's staged. We can see it's staged because it's green. And once we've added all of the files that we want to be staged to go to the cloud, we do another step called git commit. And this is where we kind of pack everything up. If you want to imagine like zipping all the files together that you want to change or whatever, put them all together in one giant ball of file. And we do that with this step here. And when we do that, we also put a message attached to it. So I'm going to say, this is not a good message. Don't ever do this. But you can usually say like a meaningful message like initial commit or I fixed this bug or whatever. And so the reason we have these messages, this -m is for message and this thing's the message, associated with each save state is for when you're looking back at the history, if you need to ever revert to a previous state, it's very quick and easy to see where you were in the past, or if you're working on a team or by yourself even, just to remember what you changed in that previous commit. And so that's where it helps to have meaningful messages. Today, there's only one commit, and it's for kind of a demo project, so it doesn't matter. After I did that, it has grouped everything up and into one commit file. And you can see we did it Reddit. There is what I've put as the message. And now if I do git status, that file is gone. We don't see any red or green. So like I said, git status will change after you do each step. So you kind of can check your work along the way to make sure you haven't missed anything. At this point, it says nothing to commit. You're good to go. But the thing it does say is your branch, which is kind of your local forked repo. That is a branch, and I'm going to talk about branches next week. It's ahead of origin master, the main file. Remember, this is the master one. Well, actually, this is right here. My origin is mine right now. And by one commit. So we need to basically, we could have these changes just kept here locally, but if we want to actually submit them to the cloud, which we do, there's one more step called git push. I'm going to press enter, and it's going to have me use my GitHub login, which is my username here. And then for this part, it's going to have me type in my password for GitHub. Don't worry, it's safe. Now, one thing to note, if you're unfamiliar with Linux, is when you type in passwords, this cursor is not going to move. It's not going to look like I'm typing anything. Oh, whoops, I typed it wrong. And so you just have to, trust yourself. I need to really stop talking while I'm doing this. There we go. And so once you finally successfully type in your password, you see it does something in it. And now my changes are pushed to the repo. So we're done with Cloud 9 at this point. We have made all the test pass. We verified the test pass when we did all this stuff. And then we upload our changes to GitHub. So now if I go back to my repo, this is my forked repo. We can see my username there. This was my previous commit message. And if we refresh the page now, let me zoom in a little bit for you guys. If we refresh the page now, we can see my latest change is there. We did it, Reddit. And if we click on the file here, we go here, we can actually see all my code has successfully been uploaded here without having to copy and paste it on here or something. So those are the commands. You do a git status and then git add your files, and you do a git commit to group them all once you've added them all there. And then you do a git push after that to send them to the cloud. This is all on that step-by-step document that I've linked in the chat earlier. And so you don't have to have any of that memorized, and eventually it becomes familiar. That's pretty much the main git commands you really need to worry about if you followed all the steps right. So at this point, I'm almost done talking. At this point, we have made this thing working. All right, so that is the first big accomplishment. Congratulations. It also shows the commit message for when you last changed a file. So we did it Reddit for this commit, we only changed this one directory and this one file here. So it's pretty nice and easy to read. The last thing we need to do for our projects in this class is that thing where I said we can send our changes back to the master directory, this guy, for them to be reviewed and accepted or declined. For our project, we're never going to accept or decline them because we don't want your changes to. Basically, if we accepted them, they would be reflected and changed the master directory. For our projects, we always want to keep them, incomplete so that someone can, work on them. So we're never going to accept your changes. All right, don't feel bad. That's just the way this project works. When you get working on open source, if you ever do, people will accept or reject them.
So we shouldn't do git push, right?
Oh, we do want to git push. I'll show you. This is how you turn in your projects for our class. So if you look back here, there's 3 steps that we check. Fork the repo. You do, well, let me show you this real quick. This is the last step. So what we want to do is for us to grade you and make sure you did it, and for this guy to update and say you completed it, there's one thing you do. You're going to do a pull request, and that's where you submit it to be reviewed. We still review your code. So if we do that, you click on that button right there. I always use this green button to kind of guide me around. The fork button's up here, clone button's green, and the pull request is right underneath it. So you click on this when you're in your repo. You've got your changes submitted. And then the rule of thumb is it's going to show all of the changes. You can see, this is the lines we deleted. These are the lines we changed. If you're curious about that, it shows all your commit messages. Sometimes you have more than one commit. That's totally cool. And I just say follow the green buttons basically. So we're going to say create pull request. I kind of showed a summary there. And this is all going to be the same information that we just saw underneath there, and it makes this little window pop up. And this is where we're going to give a pull request message, and I want you to have your name and like the project name, so you have kind of a meaningful thing. If you work on this with a group, maybe put different team member names there. And one thing to note, if you do work on these as a group, one person will create the Cloud9 and all that and set it up, but that's only going to reflect on that one person's project there. So I want you guys to get in the habit of, if you do work on a team, copy the working code to your own workspace that you create and go through the same process individually every time, because ultimately you want all these projects that you're going to do here in your own portfolio, so it looks like you've been doing stuff. So I encourage you guys to, you'll have one person start out and you'll work on the same Cloud9 together, but when you finish, I encourage you to do that. All right, so I did that, gave it a meaningful name, my name, and the bookstore project, and then I'm going to hit the green button again, create pull request. And we're almost through. Last couple of steps. By the way, if you do work as a group, well, I'll talk about that after this. Something's happening. This little construction worker looking guy here, he is actually the devil. His name is Travis, and he will be your worst enemy from now on, but he is, I don't know, he's frustrating. What this is it's a robot that is evil, and what it does is it checks all of your code against the tests, basically. So just in case you didn't run the tests here manually, Travis here is going to run the checks when you submit your code. But not just the way you might think. Travis runs it against, in our case, 3 different Python versions: Python 2, 3, 5, and 3.6. So essentially, we ultimately want you to write your code to work in Travis is horrible. You're going to hate Travis. Travis is awesome.
Travis is awesome.
Travis is awesome, but he's evil.
Yeah, so is Jenkins.
All right, fine. Anyways, you won't think Travis is awesome if you get a red X here. So basically, if all your tests pass, you'll get a green check mark. Sometimes it takes different amounts of time to run these things. It's kind of random. And if you get three green check marks, if we go back here, we'll see this green check mark. And for this project, we can actually click on this pull request button here, and we can see, hey, look, I did this again a month ago. But we can see this green check mark right here to the right of our pull request. So that's a thing. If we go to the main master project page, you can click on pull requests here, and we can quickly see a high-level view of everyone who submitted this thing and whether there's a green check mark or a red X mark. If there's a red X mark, that means one or more of these Python versions didn't pass. And so if that happens, you don't need to freak out. It just means you need to go change your code a little bit in Cloud9. And so sometimes, like, you might have your code working in Python 3, but it might, well, in Python 2, but it might work in Python 3, or vice versa, or maybe just Python 3.5 doesn't work for who knows why. If you're trying to figure out,
you have to change the code for.
Yeah, I'll show you.
Okay.
Basically, you want all these to be green check marks.
Yeah, but I mean, like in Python 2.7, don't you have to, like, your print statements don't have to have.
They have, yeah. So we always want you to write Python 3 code. Python 3 code is generally backwards compatible for the most part, and so if you write good Python 3 code, you won't have to worry about that. That's why I say when we create our virtual environment, Marcos, if you create your virtual environment in Python 3, it's going to force you to have those parentheses around your print statements, you know?
Yeah.
All right. So anyways, if we're there and we have a problem, you can actually just click on this. So let me go back. To get to here, I just found the Travis thing. You can click Show All Checks, and you can click on Details here to get to this screen. Then you can just click on a Python version here, and it will show actually like it running the tests. In this case, all of the tests are passing, and it's going to look just like it did right here. But if they're failing, it'll show you the failure with like the assert statement that went wrong, and you can look at this and have an idea of, you know, what went wrong in that particular Python version or something. This is why I say always get your code working before you submit your pull request, so you know it's running here. In at least Python 3 it's working. It'll usually work in Python 2 as well. Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, Travis is nice for that stuff, but it's just annoying if it's your code that fails. But yeah, that's pretty good, Leah.
It'll make you a better programmer. I mean, if you're wrong, you're wrong.
I know. No,
Good to know why you're
I
wrong.
completely agree. I just find him annoying. I don't think he's bad. I think he's the devil. I don't know.
I'm enjoying playing the devil's advocate.
I know. All right. So anyways, if you get a red X and you see there's an error and you kind of figure out what you need to do from here, you can go back to your Cloud9 and, you know, change your code, update your code a little bit, and just, you don't have to commit or do another pull request. You can actually just go through the git commit process again that we just did down here. And if you do that again, that will automatically update your current pull request, and it will just pop up and it will automatically show it right here. If I put a space here like this and I save it and I do a git status, I've changed the file, I'll do git add dot this time, I'll do git status, it's green, I'll do git commit -m, I'll give it a message, why did I change this, and then I'll do git push, and I will try and type my password again, and automatically it's going to update. This happens, it shows my new commit, and it shows that Travis has not been run on my commit yet, so it's going to automatically rerun Travis. This is interesting. You might have thought once you submit a pull request to be reviewed that it's interesting behavior for GitHub, and it's important to know how that's working. And so in this case, if you make a change and you've got a pull request open and you make another commit and you thought your pull request was ready, you know, be careful. You have to use like a different branch. So in this case, our branch is that forked repo. We're going to talk about other ways to make branches in the next week. So you don't have to worry about that now. Just know that if you don't get a green check mark, just change your code and submit and commit your changes again and push them. And then you'll hopefully get your green check mark. Any questions with all that? I know that's a lot of stuff again, but all of that, I'm going to just repost these links. All of that is in these step-by-step links, and you don't have to have a damn thing memorized. Any questions with this stuff at all?
The positive that he did not mention is that you don't have to have a damn thing memorized, but eventually you will accidentally memorize it. And
oh, yeah.
That is a very handy day.
Yeah. All these things that we're doing, when you go out and work for whoever, they might not use GitHub. They might not use Cloud9, but they will use virtual environments. They will use some IDE to use, and Cloud9 is similar to other IDEs. And they will use some form of revision control. And being familiar with one of these makes learning another one really easy. And so having this kind of process down, it might not be your exact process when you get a job or whatever you're doing with learning this, but it will help in the real world. All right, if there's no other questions, I'm going to move on to introducing your homework. So this is, and you can find this link right here. It's to the right of today's class. And it's going to be a project about football, which is uncanny timing because of the World Cup. And basically what this one is going to be like, if you guys remember class on Monday, this project is almost exactly the same. The main focus of this is that we want you to get comfortable doing this workflow yourself, you know, step through it on your own, and try it out, and put yourself to the test. In these classes, I've been driving it and leading you guys. See if you can do these things. See if you can read the tests. See if you can navigate around the directory structure, make your own workspace, create your own virtual environment. Try all these things out on your own and see what you're made of. And it's okay if you struggle. I actually strongly encourage that you guys use the mentor hours and do this project during the mentor hours on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, which is going to be 8 to 11 Eastern on Thursday and Friday, and then 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern on Saturday. Do it while you watch the World Cup, whatever. And so today's project, we're gonna start out by making lists of lists, just like Monday with that sorting. We're gonna kind of receive a bunch of data. I think it's right here. And we are just going to read the tests to see what you need to do. So the first one, actually we're starting out as a list of lists, and you need to turn it into a list of dictionaries. And so then the other two tasks are to kind of sort them, just like we did for sorting on Monday. So if you get stuck with this, you can either watch the video from Monday's class to kind of refresh yourself. You can use the mentors, you can talk in Slack, you can post question, and then once you finish, and not before, do not watch the solution first until you get it working. And then once you do that, you do that. Finally, once you finish this guy though, you're going to submit your changes. You do a git commit after you forked it, and then do your pull request just like I just did, and submit it for us to see. Any questions about this?
Yeah, Jason, in that assignment, there are a lot of CSV file and a CSV script also. Can you explain those?
There's a lot of what? Other things?
CSV files, and there is a CSV example script also.
Can you type that out? I'm a little hearing stupid right now. Sorry.
Files. What are those for?
What's up?
What are the CSV files for?
The CSV, oh yeah. The CSV, okay, is just going to be for your reference. This is the original data. And yeah, it's an example. Let me see here.
I can help out if you want. The CSV is a comment separated value file, and it is very much like, think of it like an Excel spreadsheet.
Yep, so I imagine that, yeah, so yeah, we used the CSV just like we did before. And remember how we had one last time, but we just got it as a giant string? You're not gonna really have to worry about that. It's just if you want a visual of the data here, kind of what it's kind of structured like. You're gonna be working with, I think, squads data here. And this is what you're gonna start with, a list of lists. And that list of lists came from this CSV file example. All right. So does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, so that's your project. Remember to submit a pull request. What I'm going to do right now before there's two more things that are going to happen. Right now, if you are interested in working as a team, I want you to do two things, or you can like message each other privately. I don't know. But remember there is this Slack channel called, let me try and get the name. It's B23. Oh yeah, you're going to have a fun time. B23 students private. If you're not in that Slack channel, you need to message Santiago and we'll put you into it. And basically you guys can communicate with each other. It's okay to talk about the project. Just don't like give away the solution in the chat. but you can work together. Generally, groups of 2 are preferred. And so, yeah, if anyone's interested in that, you can either say something in that Slack channel right now, or whenever, or yeah, probably right now. You probably want to coordinate while everyone's online right now, or you can say something in the chat or use your microphone right now. Is anyone interested in doing it as a group?
Yeah, I am.
All right, we got Marco. So put your name in the chat or somewhere. Remember that the way you guys are probably going to contact each other is through Slack. So if you have not set up Slack and you're not in that channel, you're doing yourself a disservice. Okay. Cool. All right. So there's a lot of you. So let me see here. Hold on. If you're not in Slack, I can do it right now. Let me, if you're not in the Slack channel, post your Slack name into the Zoom chat right now really quick. Okay, so Marcos, I got you. All right, we'll get you. And then, yeah, I'm getting Ben.
Okay.
All right, I just invited you guys. Anybody else not in the channel? All right. Okay, Ashu, I got you.
Okay, I'm in.
Yep. Okay, does anybody else need to be invited to the
I
Slack?
think I do, Jason.
Okay. Yeah, I think we weren't very good about inviting people to the Slack. Okay, anybody else? Okay, wow.
I'm not sure if I'm in. I have the Slack, and it's definitely related to this, but I'm not sure if it's the B23 group. How do you figure that out?
I don't know. Let me see if you're in it.
Hey, Jason, since it seems like a lot of people, while you're doing that, I'm going to look through who all's on right now and then see who's in the B23 room and then see if I can find missing people.
All right. I'm just going to add Brian real quick and make sure he's not in it. 1 second. Okay. If anybody else needs to, just message Santiago. All right. So yeah, I'd prefer it if you guys were interested in the groups, figure it out in that Slack channel. Slack is our main method of you guys communicating with each other. It's the community. Please use it. Get in the habit. There's a desktop app, there's a cell phone app. Use it and you can turn on or off notifications. So I recommend you guys use that. But if not, yeah, that's where you guys are going to figure out if you want to work in groups. So just say, I want to work in groups, and you guys can figure it out right now or whatever. So just say something on Slack. All right. The last thing I'm going to do, and at this point, if you want to work in a group, just post it on Slack. You guys can go if you want. I am going to step you guys through really quickly setting up your football dictionaries project if you want to. Now note, this implies that hopefully you have your Cloud9 set up like I asked on Monday and your GitHub account set up. If you don't, you might have to just watch this video.
Jason, the link for the project is that just going to be on the rmotr site?
Yes, that is right here.
Okay.
But I'll paste it again in the thing so you don't have to. So yeah, anybody who wants to stick around right now, we're going to go over setting this up. If you feel confident in doing that, you're free to go because those documents are good enough. What's up?
One question. How big can the groups be?
We prefer 2, but I mean, yeah, 2 is preferred, but if you really, really want a group of 3, maybe that's okay, but I'd rather you work as two. And really quick, I'm going to plug why groups are nice. If you've never programmed with someone as a group, it's really handy. Oh, I have one other thing I'm going to show you. All you do is you paste this link here. Can someone join my Cloud9 really quick? Someone click that link I just did. Hopefully you're logged into Cloud9 and you'll be able to do that. I have a lot of things I got to talk about today. Ugh. All right, so Ashu, if you can hit the request access button, I don't remember where it is on your screen. As soon as it loads. All right, so what happens is, you might not have noticed, he just requests access. Right here in the top right, there's this collaborate button here. And if I click on that, it's going to open up, and it's going to say, Ashu has requested access. So I'm going to hit grant here, and now his screen is going to refresh automatically. See how it just went offline for a second? And he's going to reload the Cloud9 workspace with read-write privileges. And so now if you see, this is his cursor, and he can type something at the same time. So Ashu, if you want to type like hello or whatever, you can do that. So, hi, Ashu. You want to type something? Or are you still loading?
Actually, I wrote on the terminal.
You know what? What happened?
He accidentally wrote on the terminal instead of in the.
Oh, I got you. Cool. Yep. So, and check this out. There's a little purple bar here that shows he wrote it. My color is orange for all the lines I wrote, and this is his. So you can kind of know exactly who to blame if you're in a bigger group than two. But we want you to be in groups of two preferred. So that's how this works. You just paste the link from your URL here to your buddy on Slack. They'll join up. We recommend you use like some kind of Google Hangouts or Skype or Zoom or whatever the heck you want to talk to each other. And that's it. You can just work and collaboratively code. It's pretty fun. The advantages to doing this are, first of all, if you've never programmed with anybody else, you'll see like, well, I don't know if anyone gets bored or lonely when you're coding by yourself. Sometimes that happens. It's nice to do it as a team. You can kind of share your victories, but you'll also get to see what working with someone is like. You'll have to communicate well what you want to do, and generally speaking, there's going to be a little bit of an experience or skill mismatch, and so that's actually good for both of you. The person who's a little bit less experienced can have someone teach them and kind of like help them figure it out. And the person who's got more experience, the best way to like solidify your foundation for what you're doing is to be able to explain it to someone. So it's really good practice for you both, and also it's great practice working as a team because that's what you're going to do probably in the real world. And there are some struggles with that, like meeting at the same time, maybe somebody doesn't do something the way you want to do it. Those are real world things that you need to have practice for. And ultimately, when you're in an interview, if you're looking for a job, at some point they're probably going to ask you, have you ever worked with someone as a team? What kind of problems did you encounter? How did you solve them? Very general questions for interviews that are common. This will help you generate those problems and solutions for it. So strongly recommended. You'll also get the projects done faster usually, which is great for your free time. And so again, I just recommend that you do these when mentors are around during the mentor hours your first time. So if you get stuck anywhere, we can help you. All right. If there's no other questions about group work and setting it up, you guys just kind of form your teams on your own. Just make sure both of your team members submit the project and go through the whole flow. So now we're going to go through and set up this football dictionaries project for anybody who wants to stick around. All right. If you feel confident you can do it by yourself, you can just go do it. All right. You're free to leave. If you do want to stay, we're going to do it together right now. So the first thing you need to do is go to this link, go to the football dictionaries thing, and log into your GitHub account. Everybody kind of here? Any questions? So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to do one step at a time, and then I'm going to move forward. And if you're not there yet, just let me know. So I'm assuming at this point, since nobody's spoken up or said anything in the chat, that you are all on this screen and logged into GitHub. All right, so the next thing you're going to do, if you're here, is you're going to click on the fork button, top right of your GitHub screen here after you're logged in. You're going to click on this, and it's going to fork the repo for you. So everyone click this button on the top right, and it's not going to work for me because I've already done this. So here I am. I have forked my repo. Okay, so hopefully you guys see your name here, your username now. You can see that you forked it, and it says where it's forked from, and everybody's happy. Is everyone here? Anyone not here yet? I'm going to play the anyone not here yet game. Please speak up if you're not there. I would rather wait additional time helping you get set up than going back to try and catch you up. So use your words. All the main talkers left. Mostly. Okay, fine. The next thing we're going to do is before we hit this clone button, I'm going to have you guys open up your Cloud9. And so let me give you the link for that. All right. So if you click on that, you're going to get to a login screen. I'm not logged out. Hold on. So it's going to be here. And I want you to click on the GitHub cat login button right here at the bottom. All right, everyone see that? Log in with your GitHub account. That is the preferred way. I don't think you actually have to, but it's kind of nice. Okay. So hopefully, is everybody on this screen sees this gray with the plus sign? If your Cloud9 is not set up yet and you're having trouble with this, you're going to need to go to that C9 problems Slack channel, and you're going to have to troubleshoot that with Santiago. He's got the access keys or whatever. So you're just going to have to watch for the rest if you're not set up on C9. And so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to hit the big gray create new workspace button. All right. So everybody here? Anybody having trouble? I feel like I'm talking to a bunch of like robots. Okay, fine. What we're gonna do is we're gonna type in our name. I'm gonna call it football. I think I've already got one, so I'm gonna put like football. I'm gonna call it World Cup, but you guys call it football. All right. And so then what we're gonna do, once we're here, we've given it a name. And by the way, you're gonna have some rmotr stuff here. Don't worry about that. You only have to do this step, and this step. So if we go here, we're gonna go back to our wherever the heck this was, and make sure it's your forked one. And then you're gonna click on the green clone or download button here, and you're gonna hit the copy button right here. All right. Once you clicked it about 100 times or once. I'll wait a second for you guys to catch up. Then all we're going to do is go back to our Cloud9 workspace and paste that link right there. And again, we should see our username in the middle of that link to make sure we copied it from our forked repo and not the master copy. Finally, the last step is we're going to hit the Python button right here. And so just as a quick step, a quick summary, we're going to give it a name without capital letters or spaces or funny characters. Call it football in lower cases. Then we're going to paste our GitHub link that we got from GitHub, and we're going to hit Python, and then we're going to hit Create Workspace. Everybody there, if you're there, you can hit Create Workspace, the green button here. Any problems so far? All right, I'm going to hit it now because nobody has said anything. It always takes forever on my computer. I don't know why. Okay, here we are. So we're at Cloud9. We see the README automatically popped up. That means we did it. We copied it over correctly. If you see the README pop up, good things are happening. We can also
Jason,
see. Yep.
I have a quick question for you. Loading it in, it prompted me to select like Sublime mode or minimal mode or the normal IDE on Cloud9. Have you seen that? Do you have a recommendation?
I've never seen that message. I assume you do normal mode though. I don't know. I've never.
All right, cool. Just checking.
Have you used like Amazon Web Services or something? Because sometimes if you've already got an Amazon account, when you do C9, it does like a different version of it. It's kind of weird.
Yeah. Yes, I do have an AWS account.
That might be what's going on. So we'll see if yours looks like mine. If it doesn't end up looking like this, you might want to like make it from a different account or something.
Yeah, it does look the same.
Okay.
I think it's just like just a workspace view changer.
Yeah, it's a little bit funky. I think there were some differences, but I can't remember. So you can tell me if it works or not.
Sounds good.
All right, so now hopefully everyone's here. We're going to go down to the terminal, and I want you to type this. I'm going to paste it into the chat in a second after I type it, but I want you to physically type it out so you start remembering it. All right, we're going to type the letter MK, and then we're going to type virtual env. That's all one word. All right. Then we're going to press space. We're going to type football. Then we're going to press space. We're going to type -P or -P. We're going to press space one more time. We do /user without an E, USR. And I'm going to paste this in a second. /bind /python3. So I'm going to paste this in there so you can have a visual. Oh, that's cool, Caleb. I'm glad you guys know this stuff. I only know what I know. All right, so I pasted the command. I know you can copy and paste that, but I'd like you to type it out just so you can start memorizing it, because you're going to type that out every time you do a project. And so after you do that, you can hit enter, and you'll see these couple of lines will run. If you mistype something, maybe it'll yell at you, and you just need to type it again. That's okay. All right, assuming everyone's got that part, we're going to do the next one, and we're going to do pip, which is pip space install, and then space -r, and then finally we're going to press the letter D or type dev or whatever you want, and then you're going to press tab and let it auto-complete for you. All right, so this is what your command is going to look like. Oh wow, hold on. I don't know why it didn't there. Jeez, that's two commands. whatever. They're not in the right order anymore, but. All right, so has everyone got this command typed out? We just press enter. At this point, and final thing is we can just type pi.tests and then space tests.py. It's kind of weird. It's like inverted, mirrored. So if we run this, let me copy this command. If we run this, oh my gosh, why does it keep doing that? Okay. If we run this, pi.test, test.py, after we've done installed our dependencies, what happened? Oh, I didn't type that right. Pi.test. Sorry. Let me do that again. I failed you guys. That's what I meant. And if we run this, we can see 3 failed. And that's the setup. Your workspace is there. You're in your football dictionaries project, and you can run your tests now. And that's it. Now you can start reading the test file, reading the README, and going into, as you can see over here, you've got your directory structure, and you can open up each of these 4 files here. You're going to start out with assignment 1, squads data, and test.py. And from these 3 in the README, you should be able to figure out kind of what's going on. Yeah, so that's it for today's class, and hopefully all of you are able to successfully set this up. If not, just harass the mentors or something. But that's it. So now you can just kind of figure it out. And if you're going to work on a team, again, you would have both of you guys will create a workspace, but you'll both work on one together. And once you get the solution working, you'll both copy it over. If you do work as a team, I guess in your pull request you could put your teammate name in the comment here in the description. That'd be cool, but you don't have to. That's it. Any other questions? Well, I didn't mean to close that. Any other questions today? Okay.
Hey, Jason. Sorry, I kind of missed the part where you talked about pooling requests. Could you quickly go over that, or should I just ask you some other time?
We just do, so that's all in the documents. It's all video recorded.
Okay, yeah, I'll just refer to the video.
I don't have any code. It's going to be the same there, but you just do get status. Well, I don't really have anything. I haven't changed any files to really show you, but right here. There
Oh yeah, I got that part. Okay, I'll just.
Oh, you mean the pull request part?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you're going to want to watch that video. For
okay.
That. But yeah, it's all documented, and if you have any trouble, again, I recommend you guys do this project with during mentor hours, so you can have, like, if you need a little bit of hand holding, that's great. It's the first time. We're more focused on, you know, first of all, you doing your first kind of bigger project by yourself or as a group, and also getting this workflow down. And we're happy to answer any questions that you might have when you're like doing a pull request or whatever. So don't be afraid to ask. All right, that is all, and good luck. The goal for this is to be done next Wednesday. Again, I think you should try and get it done by like Saturday, so you can spend Sunday and Monday preparing for Monday's class, and you don't have to work on this during the class week. But your time is your own, and some people might not be able to get it done till Wednesday, so that's okay. All right, that's it. You guys are free to go. Have a good week, and adios.
Thank you.
You're welcome.